Welcome to the Qlik Sense Beginners Workshop video series. In this video, we're going to be building our Qlik Sense application. If you haven't seen the first video, I suggest you start there. So here we are back in the Qlik Sense Cloud Hub. The first thing we need to do is upload the data files that we are going to work with to Qlik Sense Cloud. To do this, click on Import Data, and then we can just drag and drop our files onto the dialog. You'll find the data files in the data folder of the materials that you would have downloaded. The link to download the workshop materials is in the description of this video. And there we have it. We now have our two files which have been uploaded to Hub. The next thing is we're going to create an application which first loads our customer data and then the remaining data that's in the second file. Click on New App, and instead of clicking on Upload App as we did before, this time we're just going to give our app a name which I'll call Workshop Build, and click on Create App. As before, this opens up our app in its own little cloud instance. Qlik Sense tells us that we need to get some data into our application. We've got two options: to use the script editor, which is a powerful approach for those familiar with using Qlik scripting, or we can use the wizard-driven approach in the Qlik Data Manager. Let's go ahead and use this approach. Now we're going to fetch our files from Qlik Cloud, so we just click on Data Files over here on the left hand side, and we'll select Customer Data. Instantly we get a preview of what our data looks like in that particular file. We can see that Qlik has picked up that column names are encapsulated within the file itself. You can also change things like whether to expect the column names or whether to ignore a certain number of rows as it interprets the data in the file. Let's click on Add Data to add that to our Qlik application. As Qlik has loaded up the data, it's gone through each of the columns and each of the values in those columns to try and understand what sort of data has been loaded. These insights that it gains from the data help our cognitive engine provide insights and suggested charts through the Insight Manager, which is displayed now, as well as enables Qlik to provide suggested chart types once we start to bring fields onto our sheet and begin to build visualizations. We haven't got enough numeric data in our data model yet in order to generate any sensible insights, so we're going to skip the Insights Manager at this point. And that brings us to our default sheet. Let's click on Edit Mode, and that brings us into a position where we can start editing the sheet and adding content. You can see the sheet displays itself as a grid, where we can drag any of the objects from our toolbox over on the left hand side and position them to create our dashboard. Looking at our toolbox, we see we have a list of fields here that we can leverage. These are the fields that we've loaded up. We have our master items. This is something I'll come back to and explain in a moment. And then we have the range of different charts which we're able to drag onto our sheet here. Let's go back to our fields and we'll see what happens if we drag across, say, our city field and drop that onto the right hand side of our dashboard. Because Qlik understood and interpreted the data as it's loaded it up, even though this is just a bunch of city names, it's worked out that these correspond to geolocated information. So it's able to actually plot each of those cities around the world based on its city name. Let's take a look at what happens if we bring our country across. Similarly, the list of country fields now can be represented as shape data on a map, because Qlik's been able to associate each of those country names with a particular set of geolocated data that's in its internal database. Now on this side, maybe I don't want to have a map, and you may recall from our original application when we demonstrated that in the first video, that one of our charts here was showing the number of customers per country, and that was represented as a bar chart. What I can do is go back to our charts list here, grab our bar chart, drag that across and drop it on top, and we have the option to either replace it or convert it to a bar chart. By selecting Convert, it still leverages the country dimension which we've added onto that chart and says, right, you need to add in a measure here. So we can click on the measure and we'll pick our customer name field here and do a count, so that straight away we can have a count of the number of customers that we actually have in each of those countries. While any object is selected, as indicated by the orange boundary here, we can access its properties over on the right hand side here. Within the data section of the properties is the dimensions and measures that we're using on that particular chart. We also see we can rearrange the sorting here. And actually I'm just going to go back here and give a proper name to this calculation here, which is the count of customer. We'll call that number of customers as a label, which you see then reflects on our chart axes. And I'll go down here to our appearance where we can play with some more of the chart properties. Within the general tab here we have the ability to play with the titles. Now the first title I can actually type straight in here, and we call that count of customers, for instance. Notice how that comes straight across to our field over here, but we can also add in subtitles and footnotes as part of the labels there as well. In my presentation section I can do things like turn this chart on its side, show the actual values on our charts as you see, and then down within our colors section, note that Qlik's actually designed around this concept called progressive disclosure. So what it does is keep all the dialogues nice and simple for the average business user who's just getting familiar with Qlik, but as you dig deeper you start to get more and more options. So notice in turning off the default there, I now have a range of different coloring options. If I select to color my chart by measure, it then gives me some further options, in this case a range of different color schemes I can select. So I might select say our sequential classes in this color scheme here, and I'll leave my chart at that point. So there we have, within a couple of clicks, the ability to display on a map the location of all of our customers, and then the number of customers that we have in each of those countries in a bar chart. Let's now start to add a little bit more data into our data model so we can start to build a richer dashboard layout here. To add more data into our application, we go over to the menu here and we select the Data Manager. This brings up our display where it shows us all of the tables or entities that we've loaded up as part of our data model. Currently we have a customers table here, and to add in more tables we can click on the plus icon. Remember that our data files we've uploaded to our cloud data folder, and the remaining tables are contained in this Excel file called Further Data. So we see here is our orders data, here is our categories, product categories, our products, our list of suppliers, and our employees. Note that any of these columns, if we don't want to bring them into the data model, we can simply uncheck them from the list here. So maybe hire date isn't going to be particularly useful, so we can leave that out of our data model. When I click on Add Data, Qlik is once again going to go through each of those tables as it loads up the data and understand what sort of data is in that table, and also how it can therefore be connected to the other tables. So notice within a couple of seconds we now have our list of objects or entities, tables, which are displayed in our data manager here. And by understanding the data, Qlik is able to give us a range of suggestions here as to how it might how we might want to link these together. For instance, if I select the first suggestion here, it's indicating that orders table most likely needs to be linked to our products table based on the product ID field. Now this is not based on the fact that the two have the same table name, it's based on the fact that there is a understanding of the type of data in there. So if we take a look at, say, this link here between customers table and our orders table, the suggestion here is to use customer ID in our orders table and link that to cust ID in our customers table. So it is truly understanding the nature of these values that are in the fields there. Now I'm going to apply all of the suggested links here in order to build my data model, as I'm pretty confident that Qlik is going to be able to apply those correctly. And there's my completed data model, like so. Now let's go ahead and load up our data at that point. Actually, just before I do that, I'm going to show you another way we could have put these links together. If you want to break any of these links here, it's just a matter of grabbing our customers table and pulling it away like so. And I'll also do the same with my employees table in order to illustrate here something. So as I grab each of these tables here and try and drag them onto any other table, you notice I get some color coding here that's telling me, well, it can't really find a link between our customers table and the suppliers or the products table, but it's showing me by virtue of the green indicator there that most likely our customers table needs to link onto our orders table. As I grab our employees table, it's going to tell me that no, it doesn't seem to link to any of these tables here, doesn't link to our customers, but as indicated by the orange, we're finding a fairly strong sort of link here, but it's not entirely strong enough to be considered a green indicator. And that's because there's a low degree of cardinality between our fields here, between the links between the fields. That means we've got many employees in here that don't link to the orders table. However, for each of the orders, it is actually finding a link to one of the employees' records. And that's because this employees extract is a full list of all of our employees in the HR table. Not all of them are salespeople, and therefore they're not all associated with orders. So you can see Qlik is correctly picking up insights from the relationships between the data based on the commonality, based on the repetition in those links, and that's all based on its understanding of the data. Now if you have a link that you want to define manually, it's just a matter of bringing the tables together. So once again we'll use our employees and orders, drop one on top of the other, and while the link itself is selected, you can then click on the button here, which would show the default link that was applied. Click on Custom Association, and then you can come in here and pick which of the fields on the left hand side you want to link to which of the fields on the right hand side. So if we linked on Office to Customer ID, which obviously isn't the correct link, we can then see the potential values here that would link on either side, and you even get insights in the center here based on, again, the red, orange and green, showing you whether it looks like a valid link to Qlik. Let's cancel that, and we'll leave our default association here based on employee ID. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and commit all of these decisions here in terms of my data modeling by loading up the data like so. Okay, before I go back to my sheet and start to edit it, what I can actually do is start to do some more data modeling here by maybe adding some calculated dimensions in here. And let's see how we can do that. So I'm going to select the orders table here, and then come down and click on our edit button. And this brings up a list of the fields with some of the values here in our orders table. Straight away we can start to get some insights based on the data that's in these columns. So if I was to look at, say, our customer ID field, I can see the distribution. Let's just select this particular field here. I can get some metadata about the field, so it's telling me I've got 90 distinct values in this column. There's a total of 2,172, and I can see the distribution of those values across my data set like so. So my most common customer, the one with the most orders in here, is CUS37. If I was to look at something like our sales value here, I get slightly different information. So it's giving me min, median, average of this field here because it's a field that can be aggregated. I find if I come down here, I've got some further wizards where I can quite easily do some things like create some bucketing. So maybe I'd like to create a new calculated field here that actually shows me small, medium and large in terms of our sales values. That's going to be 3 buckets, so let's actually change this value here to 3. And then I can see how many of each of our sales falls into the different buckets as we've got them currently laid out. So the majority are falling into our first bucket there, so I'm going to move that right down to, let's say we'll call that up to $1,000. And I'm going to call this bucket small. Move on to the next one and say bracket that up to about maybe $5,000. And I'll call that medium. And then our final one will be the categorization of large sales. And there we go. So now I create buckets. And Qlik has created a new field here for me called sales bucketed. And I might call that order size, for instance. So it's as easy as that to add new calculated fields into our data model using the wizards that are available here. I can also do that manually by clicking the Add Field button here and leveraging our calculated field editor here, where I can access all of Qlik's functions, all of the fields that are available, and other things like variables and our expression components. But at that point, I'm going to exit out of my having made a change to our table here, I'll click on Load Data again, and that will now rerun that logic so that that order size field becomes a part of my data model. And at this point, I'll go back into the sheet. So you can see there's a lot of capabilities there to create calculated fields to transform our data as we're actually loading it into Qlik. Okay, so if you've been following along, congratulations, you've now built your data model. What I'll do at this point in time, I'll rename the default sheet that we've got here to Dashboard. Just note that when you don't have any objects selected like so, when this object is selected, I'm looking at the properties of that particular chart. If I click on the background there or have nothing selected, I'm actually looking at the properties of the sheet itself, and this is where you can change the title, change the image used, change the grid level, or even extend the sheet as a scrolling sheet on the page to create longer views within Qlik Sense. So congratulations, I hope to see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.